Hello again. I'm really excited to share a new project today in the art journal, an embroidery mixed media project. And I've tried to take some inspiration from Victorian tapestries. Now, this journal is fantastic because it's got lots of different pages and textures in it. And it also happened to have a page of fabric, some pages of fabric. And so I worked on one of those pages. But you could do this on a piece of fabric separately and incorporate it into an art journal, or just leave it out as a free piece, if you like, an independent piece. I really love to take inspirations from nature in my journals, and for this particular piece I was inspired by a trip to Thomas Hardy's cottage in Dorset. Now, I'm a huge Thomas Hardy fan, both his stories and his poetry. Now, Thomas Hardy's cottage is not that far from where I am. I'm in Devon, and Thomas Hardy's cottage is in a place called Bockhampton in Dorset. Dorset is the next county, and I thought it would be really lovely to take you with me. So that's what I did. I took my camera and we start in the woods outside the cottage. There's a little walk to the woods, about 15 minutes, through a beautiful wood that was very inspiring to Thomas Hardy. In fact, he wrote one of his books under the greenwood tree in that very cottage. And the first line of his very first story reads, "To dwellers in a wood, almost every species of tree has its voice as well as its feature." So he was very attuned to nature, and we'll see that when we go to the cottage. So I'd love to take you with me today, and then I'd like to share with you the process in the art journal. And I thought it looked quite effective. It wasn't that complicated. Some very simple stitches. I had some watercolour pencils and some pens, yes, and a little iron-on transfer as well. Quite simple. But I thought it turned out quite well. I was happy with it. Anyway, let me show you Hardy's cottage, including the woodland walk up to the cottage, because that was absolutely beautiful and, yes, very peaceful. Now, today is a little bit brighter, but when I went to Thomas Hardy's cottage in Bockhampton, the weather was a little changeable. The sun was coming out and then it was disappearing. But that's pretty typical for a day in the English countryside. Anyway, let's get going. Now, the trip to Thomas Hardy's cottage was very inspiring, and in particular the garden. So what I'm going to try and do is something a little different. Instead of my usual painting collage, I'm going to do a little bit of mixed media with embroidery today. Now, I'm not a brilliant embroiderer, but I can do some basic stitches. So I'm going to try and use a transfer, and I've got a couple of transfers here which I picked up from my local charity shop when I went thrifting. And I think I've mentioned before, I get most of my resources that way. So I cut a couple of shapes out, and I want to decide which I might use. Now, the garden is very much done in a Victorian style, and the gardens that the National Trust have planted out, the volunteers have planted out, is Victorian in style. So I think perhaps this, which has got a kind of Victorian look to it with the nice frame around it, could be fantastic. So let's get the iron on and press that onto the fabric. So I think before I start, I might just try and cut that out a bit more. And just pop a little bit of masking tape just to secure it in place. I'm pleased with that. That's come out very well. And I think I can probably reuse that. I don't know how many number of times, but yes, I think that's reusable. Now, in terms of other resources, I've got a little pile of embroidery silks, which I've collected. Plus, I'm going to use some watercolour pencils and some felt tips. Yes, so quite basic resources. For the embroidery, I've decided to do chain stitch because it's really lovely, especially for leaves and stems and things like that. And it's quite simple. Now, this is just the way I do it. I'm not completely sure it's 100% right, and if you know a better way, then please let me know. But this is the way I think my mother taught me how to do chain stitch. So I bring the needle up through the back of the fabric, and then I leave a loop, a little loop there. And then what I do is I'm going to go one stitch length forward and then come up from the back and bring the needle up through the centre of this loop here, and then I'll pull it through then, and that makes a chain. I hope that makes sense. I think there are many, many wonderful tutorials on YouTube in terms of doing it very clearly, and I'm not very close up to the stitches, so you probably can't see, but yes, I will carry on in that way. Yes, so chain stitch for the leaves and some parts of the stem, I think. I've got a lovely quote from Thomas Hardy here about nature. Rays from the sunrise drew forth the buds and stretched them into long stalks, opened petals and sucked out scents in invisible jets and breathings. Isn't that lovely? I think that's very apt for sharing the delights of that garden. You agree, Millie? I think Thomas Hardy understood nature.